Thank you very much, John. So I'm going to ask Greg and Richard to come to the table. We have time for maybe one or two questions. So I see Roy had his hand up first. If you could pass the microphone over there.
Yes. Thanks. Craig, you will have had the experience that I've had over the years where I've talked to a patient and their family and said, "You haven't got Alzheimer's disease. Oh, good, doctor, you've got frontotemporal dementia." And you're talking about getting away from using the words dementia, and we've got dementia with Lewy bodies and frontotemporal dementia. So we need to remember in this, although it's an important thing, we presumably are going to find the same things about these other types of dementia, and it's a challenge when you talk about things like getting away from dementia research institutes and everything.
Yeah, and I think the big thing here. I actually messaged somebody back in a tweet who asked the same question just as I was sitting there, because I think we're obviously dedicated with an EPAD to preventing Alzheimer's dementia, but the spin-off from that was we're going to understand neurodegenerative disease as a whole, because the EPAD project will have in the cohort many different pathologies, many different trajectories towards different types of, for want of a better word, dementias. So we'll be able to benefit those areas as well. So the term dementia may be applied now, but in the future we will have models for preventing frontotemporal disease, for preventing Lewy body disease. So that will come naturally out of the EPAD project as well. It won't be our specific mandate to do that, but I'm hopeful other people will pick up our data and run with it.
Okay, we have another question over there.
Thank you. I'm Peter Nissen, the CEO of the Danish Alzheimer Association, and thank you for three very interesting presentations. I have a comment and a question about this notion of constancy and clear communication. It's very often something that is put forward, and actually it's a fantasy that doesn't exist in the real world. Communication is, as you know, understood by the persons taking part in the communication and understood by the person receiving the information. And therefore this idea of consistency and clear information, it will have multiple meanings for different target groups and persons. So my question is, have you, when you have this notion of clear information, taken into consultation persons, consultants with the experience of communication when you draw up these guidelines?
Is that to me? Yeah. It was my slide. So there is. So obviously, any message that's communicated depends on both the way that it's framed by the person communicating it and the expectations and the understandings of the person who gets it. But there has been a lot of work done over the years around genetic testing, particularly about how you develop ways of communicating risk information, particularly in ways that are as well understood as you can make them. So I think that provides a good model of, at least in the short term, of how you think about this kind of thing. So I mean, it's down to the kind of graphical form of the risk information representation.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jeremy Hughes, Chief Executive of Alzheimer's Society in the UK. It sort of naturally follows on from Nis's comment, actually. Richard, it sounds very promising in terms of the sort of predictive opportunity and the information and so on, but is it not a reality that your 11 criteria means that it will be impossible to actually implement because there are too many criteria, it's too difficult, people will avoid getting into this space?
I think that's kind of the point at the moment, though, is that so particularly the communication of biomarker-based information to asymptomatic individuals, the guidelines on both amyloid and genetic risk say that there is very minimal value of this to people who are asymptomatic. So the guidelines relate to the conditions in which that kind of information has to be provided. And that I think as we go through the development of the trials processes, as these kinds of trials become more common, we will work out what kind of information this is and how we need to treat it. And so maybe what are 11 guidelines now will become a more common form of clinical practice in the end. But.
Okay.
I also just wanted to add something to the question by Nis. And we are working with the communications agency to try and develop videos in which we are trying to explain some of that difference between Alzheimer's dementia, Alzheimer's disease to a kind of more general public. We also want to make sure that the people that are participating in the EPAD project, that they are getting a proper understanding of that. So, and the collaboration with you have researchers on the one hand explaining the research rationale behind it. You have people providing the kind of ethical background on that. We had kind of feedback from our European working group on a number of these issues of around communication, and you have a proper communications agency that is used to making sure that language is provided in a way that is understood by the general public. So hopefully within the next 2 months we should be able to show a very interesting and instructive video that will give you some ideas about some of the issues that we've been discussing.
Yeah, just very quickly picking up, and I mean, I think we've also got to recognise where we are in the stages of this conversation. I mean, you mentioned the Dubois criteria, which are about 5 or 6 years old, maybe slightly older now. I think what we're trying to do today, or within EPAD, is set a framework for the conversation to take place. We're not actually trying to produce guidelines. We're not trying to, bring any conclusion to this. When new treatments become available, as we hope in the next few months even, or years, better diagnostics, better disease models, then these conversations will be informed by the data that's brought to the table and the therapies. I think what we were trying to achieve here was just start the conversation or catalyse a conversation rather than actually conclude it.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that's all we have time for now. Thank you very much to the panel for your excellent talks and for the audience for participating. The speakers will be available for a few minutes afterwards if you still have any outstanding questions. And I'd just like to bring your attention to the fact that you can follow us in a number of ways. You can go to our website where you can subscribe to our newsletter. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter. So thank you so much.